one of the things that I want to just kind of keep in mind is that we're going to have questions at the end of their presentation. So we'll have each of our presenters go. They'll speak for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll have a good amount of time at the end. So hopefully it'll be a good discussion, not just you all talking to each other, but us talking to you, and hopefully get some interesting crossovers here. I think that the papers, the theses, really work well together, so I'm pretty excited about that. So to start us off, Elisa Garcia is going to teach us a little bit about Brazil. Take it away.
Hello, again, Elisa Garcia is my name. Today I will be going over religious nationalism in Brazil, more specifically on the spread and normalization of radical populism in Brazil. It's not clicking.
The arrow, right arrow? Are you on the PC keyboard?
Oh my god, there's so many.
There you go. On the PC keyboard.
Alright, so the kind of overarching basis of my thesis is in Brazil, Christianity has globalized to the point of mass commercialization and has garnered increased support by acquiring media outlets that have rights over news, newspapers, movies, and television broadcasts. Today, the two largest denominations in Brazil are Catholicism and evangelism. And during the 2018 presidential elections, Jair Bolsonaro was able to claim victory by pulling from the agendas of these minority conservative groups, more specifically from evangelists. Around the time of the election, Brazil had been dealing with consequences from the Lava Jato corruption scandal, which increased citizen mistrust in politicians and skepticism over the government. So due to the people growing increasingly tired of traditional Brazilian government, Bolsonaro was able to kind of snake his way in and make it to the mainstream. So my research questions are, was Bolsonaro's win genuine or in retaliation against corrupt politicians? How did Bolsonaro's conservative views attract the evangelical voters? In what ways did Brazilian media outlets boost the right-wing candidate to winning the presidency? And lastly, what factors in Bolsonaro's presidency engendered populism? So, welcome to Brazil, 2018, or 2014. So since 2014, the political climate of Brazil has drastically changed and really disjointed and fragmented the public. After a decade of economic and social development under the Workers' Party, the progressive facade began to wither, exposing hundreds of political and business figures involved in an international scandal known as Lava Jato, or Operation Car Wash. It is like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, corruption scandal in Latin America, with about $80 billion that was laundered. So in 2018, that is the, I guess, political election that we will be focusing on. And the main parties are going to be the Workers' Party, which is a center-left party, and the Social Liberal Party, which is the PSL. They're a more fluid party, but at this point in time, they were leaning more far-right. So to kind of break down like the key things that were happening in Brazil, in 2014, the PT incumbent, Dilma Rousseff, was re-elected and to be president, and at the same time, investigations into the Lava Jato case were beginning. So within 2 years, Rousseff was found to have some involvement in the money laundering scheme, and so there was a move by the PSL to impeach her, which eventually happened. And the VP, Michel Temer, he stepped up as acting president until the next elections in 2018. The 2018 elections were, I guess, very chaotic. And like I said earlier, it was really between the PT and the PSL. So this far right group and this central leftist group that were really clashing. And it was a really tight race with about a 3% deficit, like between the politicians, between the people who could have been elected. And Jair Bolsonaro, a far right representative, he was elected as 38th president of Brazil. After 4 years under his reign, there was the next election in 2022, which was another very tense election, in which the PT was able to regain their position in office with former President Lula, who had in the past helped rebuild Brazil's economy, and so his re-election was kind of like a hope and solution to get Brazil's economy back on track. And I wanted to just throw in a little snippet for us Americans here. In 2023, at the beginning of this year, Bolsonaristas, so people who support Bolsonaro, actually believed that the results from the 2022 election were not they were false, that the elections were rigged, and they went to attack the Capitol and other government buildings in Brazil. And they claimed Lula to be an illegitimate president and that Bolsonaro was the rightful president. So, moving on, I would like to kind of cover the conservative agenda that was behind Bolsonaro's 2018 campaign. So right here, I went ahead and included his slogan, which is Brazil above everything and God above everyone. So he really tried to get Christian supporters to back up his conservative views, and he was successful in that. As you can see here, some of the things on his agenda, like the rejection of traditional democracy, opposition or like the legitimacy of his opponents, are seen in evangelism, which is kind of like parallel. They both mirror each other, and so they really mesh together. The evangelists felt that Bolsonaro would help bring their agendas to the limelight, and as they were a minority group at that point, they kind of bandwagoned on his campaign, and he was fully accepting of it. And he fed into those conservative views. Conservatism is about preservation, and so his campaign was really about preserving the purity of Brazil. So yeah. Next up is the way that the media kind of, the relationship the media had with Bolsonaro. So in Brazil, there is a law that requires free airtime to their politicians, depending on how many seats that they have in Congress. So, or in their house. And the party that Bolsonaro was a part of was so small that he was unable to receive this free airtime through traditional media. And that forced him to seek out other outlets, and his campaign was fully run basically on social media, which is an untapped territory for Brazilian politicians. And so he was definitely a pioneer in that, but the dark side of it is that it really fueled this like outlandish kind of environment online in like Reddit circles, on Twitter, as well as WhatsApp and Facebook. There was even a point where Twitter fired their staff because the people who were supposed to be moderating were not doing their job. They were in with Bolsonaro. So traditional media outlets would be like the newspaper, TV broadcast, and so the way that works is, candidate would make a statement or there's some sort of inciting incident. And a journalist group, they would assess the situation and determine whether it aligns with something that they would want to put out there for their viewers, or like that aligns with their reader profiles. From this point, or after that point, then if they choose to publish it, then a story is published, and they give a platform to the message. In Bolsonaro's case, he was able to kind of go around the traditional media, but also tap back into it. Because with his outlandish comments on Twitter or on Facebook, they would gain a lot of traction, and traditional media would have no other choice but to publish what he was talking about or what was going on, which kind of amplified his radicalism, and developed this like toxic relationship where the media was, I guess, trying to just expose it, but instead of exposing him, they allowed him to get a greater audience. So that's the kind of tricky thing about it, and yeah, it was kind of crazy. So, like I said, he did use other mediums, and right here, I went ahead and broke them down. So the most popular one was video streaming. He would do videos on YouTube. He met with other conservative or populists. He would do like YouTube shows, vlogs, things like that. He also would go on WhatsApp. With WhatsApp, there would be like groups, and within those groups, there would be the disbursement of like news surrounding Bolsonaro, but also fake news that would circulate, and it would garner so much attention that it was kind of hard to define what was news and what wasn't. Instagram and Twitter. So, and I have this quote here, which is, "It would have been virtually impossible for Bolsonaro to win the presidency without these social networks to amplify his discourse," which is completely true. As I said earlier, he did not have access to those free ads. So lastly, Bolsonaro is considered to be a populist leader. And he fed into the populist radical right, also known as the PRR. This is an ideology characterized by values such as nationalism, racism, xenophobia, and authoritarianism, which is, if you don't know, it kind of is just kind of like wanting to defend their values from external influences, like I said earlier, preserve the traditions. He also promotes an us versus them narrative. So he further divides a society that was already suffering from the corruption scandals that kind of threw them in a loop earlier. And yeah. So in conclusion, Bolsonaro's win was a result of a complex political and economic instability in Brazil. The scandal preceding the election encouraged people to eject the traditional democracy in exchange for radical change. Also, Bolsonaro and evangelists had complementary agendas, and the election of Bolsonaro would push the conservative policies to the forefront of Brazilian politics, causing that shift that they had desired. Traditional media outlets also in Brazil have a symbiotic relationship with controversy, resulting in the amplification of outrageous views, which have the potential to garner a larger audience for that individual. And lastly, populist ideology is a global social force that challenges traditional democracy, and post-2014, Brazilians demanded change from their failing political institutions. Bolsonaro was the answer towards that, and his radical right campaign provided a collective identity for a fragmented society that was just looking for something better. And